Thanks, Julie. I think what's great is we're getting it all out on the table, and that's what we were hoping to do is get as many ideas and many reflections out on the table, as widespread as they are, as different as they are. You all come from a lot of different, great, rich backgrounds, and I think our participants represent some of these sectors that you all work in. So excited to continue to put it all on the table and try to weed through it and figure out and make meaning of it. So Taj, I'm going to turn it over to you to share some of your reflections too, and then we'll open it up for a quick discussion.
Thank you, Aditi. Really resonating with what you just shared, Julie, about values, and it makes me think a lot about Dr. King and Grace Lee Boggs and the recent rediscovery of King's work as it relates to this notion of the radical revolution in values and the triplets in the beloved community. Because what King asserted is that there will be no equity, there will be no justice without a revolution in values. That the challenges that we face are fundamentally essentially spiritual challenges, they're cultural challenges, because they have to do with fundamental questions, which has to do with what is a human being? What is the value of life? What is the nature of our relationships to each other? And what is our place in the cosmos, right? And that this country has some fundamental challenges in relationship to that. I mean, here articulated as sort of racism, misogyny, dehumanization, racism, militarism, greed, the triplets, right? And so, looking at the work of Michelle Alexander or Reverend Barber and the folks who are kind of coming back to this King tradition that's centralizing the role of culture and values in deeper and broader transformation. Like Mimi, I am a recovery, an organizer, a community organizer in recovery, trying to recover from my years of community organizing. She and I were co-directors for many years at an organization called the Movement Strategy Center. And now I lead an initiative called Full Spectrum Capital Partners. But some of the work we did at MSC was really about power building and trying to learn about, with our partners, like what does it mean to have a transformational approach to power building, as opposed to a transactional approach, a siloed approach, like a comprehensive approach. And a lot of that work we did in partnership and collaboration with our friends at the California Endowment, because we helped to design and launch a 10-year Building Healthy Communities initiative that was focused on trying to build health equity. And the conclusion of that 10-year process was the foundation realizing that the issue is not, public health systems reform or education reform. Power is the issue. If communities have power and self-determination, they can define the problems, identify the solutions, and do the systems transformation. So really that was the outcome of that 10-year journey was sort of, I jokingly say, like, the foundation figure out what every basic community organizer learns at their first training. The issue is power. Power is the issue. But then in conversation with the foundation recently as they're transitioning, I said, okay, that's great. Now tell me what power means. And what I found is that I asked 10 different people and I got 10 different answers. And so building a very sort of precise and rooted understanding of power building is really important. And this conversation has really elevated it. And the core insights that emerged from this discussion have to do with the sort of 3 to 4 domains of power that we like to talk about, which have to do with cultural power, political power, and economic power, and what we call integrated power. And what we found in our work with the endowment as recovering community organizers is that we tend to put a lot of emphasis in the philanthropy, social change world, primarily on political power, the ability to change policy and change the rules, sometimes change who the decision makers are. Secondarily, a focus on cultural power, narrative power, and often not really much focus on real economic power building. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But the communities that we work with essentially realized, and this is some work that Aditi has done in terms of thinking about community wealth building and economic power and sort of the centrality of that within power building overall, is that our community power building efforts need to really, definitely strengthen our focus on political and cultural power, but we need to add an economic power dimension to our power building strategy, because in some ways, cultural power is like encompassing and primary. It's like the languages that we use, the metaphor that you use, all the things that Julie, you were saying about like narrative and ideology, like, and that's why the right has been really systematically focused on narrative and cultural power, because they understand that if you can define reality, you can make the rules and change the policy. So cultural power is primary as an encompassing. Economic power is foundational, right? Economic power is foundational. So it's a problematic that that's the aspect of power that we least focus on within the nonprofit philanthropic infrastructure, because political power is reflective of cultural and economic power, right? Ask any rich person, what's more important, assets or income? Assets. It's all about wealth. The issue of equity is equity. The issue of ownership is ownership. Who owns what and how is it owned, right? That's what I spend most of my time on now. Last thing I'll say is that when we're reflecting on power, and the power wheel that Aditi shared really is another power framework that kind of emerged from our partners at USC with the work that they do with folks around the country, but in particular in this dialogue and collaboration with the endowment, because the endowment really as an institution was focused on power building across communities statewide. And so the challenge with that political power wheel is it's fundamentally a wheel that's about political power. There are other frameworks and approaches that are fundamentally and complexly about cultural power, approaches that are about economic power, and then approaches that are about integrated or transformational power. And so the work we're starting right now with the endowment is really how to build on the strength that's been built around the anchor focus and capacity around political power, and help to link that in a more integrated way to cultural and economic power. So those are some quick reflections on power, and just really grateful that this conversation is happening, and excited to hear where we take it next.